Hey guys, something really interesting came up in the last few days. Counter-Strike Neo got leaked onto the internet. So today, let us have a look at what Counter-Strike Neo is and what came out of the leak so far. We here at ESCalation have talked extensively about the Counter-Strike spin-offs for the Asian market, namely Counter-Strike Online/Nexon Zombies and Counter-Strike Online 2. We even got our hands onto a Chinese free-to-play CSGO account and explored that. Nexon's games do implement a variety of different skins and all sorts of new ridiculous weapons like laser cannons. However, all of these games, although free to play, have the classic Counter-Strike scenario at the core, meaning a terrorists versus counter-terrorists scenario, and all of them are based on the PC platform. Now in Japan, Valve's approach to the country's market looked a little different than in the rest of the Asian market. They partnered up with two different companies and brought their games to arcades. If you follow this channel, you will know about Half-Life 2 Survivor v2, a single and multiplayer arcade adaptation of Valve's Half-Life 2. Then there's its shoot-off Cyber Diver, which shares very minor elements with the code of Team Fortress 2, but it's mainly a non-Valve branded version of Half-Life 2 Survivor v2. And then there's a conversion of Left 4 Dead 2 that changes the cast and adds lots of bizarre features and items, like a rolled-up newspaper as a melee weapon. But before all of those came out, Namco/Bandai had a hand at making a Valve title suitable for the Japanese market, and that game was Counter-Strike Neo. When comparing Counter-Strike Neo style to all the other Counter-Strike games, it becomes apparent that it had been massively changed to appeal to a Japanese audience. Though, when I see many of these games that have been adjusted to an Asian audience, I ask myself, is this really appealing to them, or is it just a lazy attempt at pandering to them? But anyways, let's not get sidetracked. CS Neo had two versions, one originally released in 2003 and an updated version in 2005. The original run of Neo was more of a test market build, seeing if the game would even do well in the Japanese market. Since the second version exists, it is safe to assume that the first version was a success. We will focus on version 2, as it is the version that we have the most information about and is the version that got leaked in the first place. So let us begin with the technical side of things. The second generation machines utilized a Linux operating system. It is currently unknown on what the first generation ran, but it is speculated to be running on a Windows operating environment. As for hardware specifications, the second generation arcade machine was based on Nvidia's Enforce 2 motherboard. It also featured a GeForce graphics card and an AMD socket. There are a few interesting notes about the peripherals. It was not possible to attach your own equipment such as mouse and keyboard to the machine because the machine worked with dedicated devices, according to the developer. Although that was kind of corporate speak to don't fiddle with our machines, since they just used regular mouses and keyboards and you can buy them on eBay today. The machines also did not include a headphone jack, so if it was too loud in the arcade, tough luck, you were stuck with the loudspeakers. The second generation of machines also included a special card reader that was required to play the game with your personal profile, similar to the system in the Taito arcade machines. CS Neo was still classic Counter-Strike underneath the surface of massive reskinning and renaming. While the first generation of the game was still seemingly closer to the original, the second version ran on a heavily modified version of the Gold Source engine, aka Half-Life 1 engine. It was so massively modernized that we can find elements of modern engines like the Source engine in it, namely cube maps and bump maps. While looking through the files, we noticed that the game utilized the DDS texture format, similar to how Counter-Strike Xbox worked. Speculation here, but maybe CS Neo was based off Counter-Strike Xbox. It wouldn't be so out there if you think about it. Both games used CS Condition 0 as a base. When looking at footage of CS Neo, it becomes apparent that they bumped up the lighting effects and visual quality in general quite a bit, to a point that they even implemented water reflections, similar to various custom Gold Source renders like Trinity, Half-Life FX, and so on. Although the game was based on Condition 0 and, according to the developers, tried to capture the gameplay feeling of CS 1.5 and 1.6, it took all the weapon models and most animations from Counter-Strike Source, although a few weapon models used their Counter-Strike Condition 0 animations, making this game into somewhat of a hybrid, not only on the technical level but also style-wise. When looking at the game files for the first time, one of us commented that the art direction is a total mess of visual styles. The level architecture looks vastly different from what we know from the regular Counter-Strike. All the maps included have been built exclusively for the game to suit the futuristic setting that the developers chose, but more about the setting later. The player models have also been completely redesigned. The terrorists, here called CSF, have a semi-futuristic paramilitary design. The counter-terrorists, here called Neo, go all the way down the futuristic path. This is an overview of the player models of the first generation. Amongst them such Counter-Strike's classics as Mr., X-Scuba, as well as everyone's favorite Goa, Fairy and Marps 2. Imagine this shit in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. For the second generation, the player models were redesigned to a more streamlined look. Every side could pick from 15 different designs. The designs were all available in a male and female variant. The visual diversity would be increased even further by the fact that the player's rank would be represented by a color. These levels ranged from 1 to 5, just like the player models were just for the looks and did not influence the player's abilities in any ways. The ranking system was simply used to even out the skill level amongst the players during matchmaking, something regular Counter-Strike only saw with Counter-Strike Global Offensive in 2012. Playing CS Neo with your own user profile required a player ID. These came in the form of physical ID cards on which your personal stats and player information were saved onto. The before-mentioned card reader included in the machine's desk was used for them. Since the online support for the arcade machines ended in 2009, you are now no longer able to save or retrieve your player stats and have to restart every time from the beginning with creating an account before playing. Before the online support was discontinued, the game supported clan tags, online matchmaking for solo players as well as full teams of 5, enabling battles between different stores, and generally offered a lot of customization options like the regular Counter-Strike. The game offered a variety of different game modes, mostly revolving around modifications of the classic bomb defuse mode, as well as single-player missions and mini-games. All of them were focused around the game's overarching narrative. However, it was possible to create lobbies with the parameters of the classic Counter-Strike games, meaning $800 starting money and so on. Counter-Strike's standard story simply follows the scenario of anti-terrorism operations. On the other hand, Counter-Strike Neo revolves around the fight against the mysterious Neo Corporation that created what appears to be superhuman soldiers. The remains of humanity's militaries from all around the world try to combat them. Funny thing, the remains of the military, who appear to be the good guys, are actually the terrorists from the regular Counter-Strike. Here they are called CSF, which stands for Cosmopolitanism Special Forces. And Neo, the evil corporation, taking the role of the counter-terrorists, well, they just stand for Neo, I guess. The whole conflict between Neo and the CSF arose after an experiment of the Neo Corporation caused an asteroid to collide with the moon. The shock of the explosion destroyed the moon and fragments of it crashed into our planet, pushing the Earth away from its axis, which led to massive changes in climate and starting worldwide chaos. The Neo Corporation constructed a gigantic base around the biggest moon fragments that crashed into the Earth around the Gulf of Mexico, mining it for resources and thereby controlling the world economy. Okay, let's cut this short. Basically, we have a generic dystopian future plot here. Worldwide chaos, the Neo Corporation grabbing all the resources, controlling almost the whole world, and the remains of humanity's military forces trying to stop them. Got it? Okay. Apparently you need a crazy story to appeal to the Japanese audience. A simple bad guys versus the police, that doesn't cut it there. In addition to all that, there's an entire storyline called White Memories, told in the form of a visual novel/manga. Don't nail me down on the definition there. We would tell you more about it, but that shit is 20 plus episodes. We don't have the time, or the money, or the energy to cover that in depth. Since that is all in Japanese and would require us hiring a translator, and well, we cannot do that. Well, so far for the game's history and storyline. So, what do we have in the leak? Well, it is the content of the hard drive of a second generation arcade machine, meaning that we do have the entire game. But here comes the catch. We cannot just open it like Half-Life 2 Survivor, which was designed for Windows XP. Counter-Strike Neo is designed to run on Linux. That in itself would not be a big problem either. We can just install Linux onto a system and run it. The problem is that the game was designed for a special hardware, which we do not have. Maybe there is a way of getting it to run on a standard Linux distro, but right now in the testing that has been done, it won't start the executables. Either Neo is crafted with a special Linux distro in mind, rendering it impossible to run on any other distro, or we just picked the wrong distro that doesn't accept Neo. So until we or someone else figures out the workaround, we are forced to work with an alternative method of getting the game to run. Since it is Counter-Strike at its core, one might think that it should be possible to just mount the game onto an existing game like Condition Zero, since it is based on it. That is impossible due to the extreme modification that was done to the engine. For example, Counter-Strike Neo uses a special type of map file that cannot be read by any normal gold source engine. While the leaked files do include BSPs, they are mainly event maps, maps belonging to version 1, test maps, and collision maps for version 2's maps. Meaning that the whole map geometry is there, but everything is brightly colored in textures that are meant to be invisible in the actual game. Meaning that we can somewhat play the maps, but it all looks incredibly weird. Kind of like these custom LEGO theme maps. So let us take a look at the version 1 maps, of which we have 2. These are in the BSP file format, thereby theoretically readable by regular Counter-Strike games. But here comes the next problem. Counter-Strike Neo's engine has an extended pre-cache system that goes past the limits of regular gold source. But we were able to find a workaround. Not elegant, but it works. We combined the files of CS Neo with the client binary of Counter-Strike 1.3, CS Neo's server binary, which is likely just Condition Zero's server binary, and let it run on the XASH3D engine, which is an engine compatible with many gold source games, like Half-Life and all its wonderful mods. XASH3D can handle all of the assets Counter-Strike Neo's maps want to pre-cache, so we are at least able to show off some gameplay, demonstrating some of Counter-Strike Neo's maps and models until we are able to run the full, proper version. And that loosely coupled together CS Neo is what you have been seeing for the last few minutes. By the way, it would be possible for Gold Source to have an extended pre-cache if Valve were to update it or give out the engine code, which is something that they most likely will never do. So that is where we are with the leak of Counter-Strike Neo so far. For the future, we will try to get the game to run properly. In the meantime, we will try to fix up some maps and make them playable in regular Counter-Strike, and then share them with you. And until then, we can at least show you where all the files have been dumped, so you can fiddle around with them for yourself if you like. And also, for the fun of it, we'll share with you a selection of player models that do work with regular 1.6 or Condition Zero. You will find everything in the description down below. We hope you enjoyed this little overview of the game's history, basic story, and the state of the leaked game itself. Until then, have a nice day, and as always, goodbye and guten Tag.